Welcome to Rebel Speak and Be Encouraged. And today I'm reading from Acts 27. It's where Paul is being taken to Rome. He's arrested. He's under arrest, and there's a centurion named Julius, which always makes me think that probably, Paul's the writer of Acts is Luke, and he's with them, and he knows the centurion Julius. He calls him by name, and God reveals something to Paul. But what God reveals to Paul, you'll see changes. And I believe that's because of prayer. And much like the story of Abraham, when the angel and God, it's kind of a mix, the people appear at Terameth or something, I don't know. When they're going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And should we reveal to Abraham what's gonna happen? And there's so much sin in the land. And then Abraham asks for, will you destroy it if there's 40? And he brings it down. He's dialoguing with God. He's engaging with God regarding outcome. And I believe we see this in Acts 27. It's just a way of encouraging us to pray into situations that we don't, like, even as you perceive something in your spirit, it doesn't have to be the final outcome. I remember kind of the first time that this was really overtly spoken was my husband was working. He was working on raising funds for a ministry, and had to do with a ship, and it was like they were going to have a lovely kind of fundraiser on a boat in San Pedro, and Michael was praying, and he just saw there was going to be a heavy rain. And he was like, I don't know what to do with that. And then so in his prayer, he saw there was going to be heavy rain. And then he felt like, no, I can pray into that. And he just prayed and prayed and prayed until he saw the heavy rain, like the clouds move in prayer and the sunshine. And then it nearly rained that night, but it didn't. And they had a lovely time. And that was the first time where kind of he and, spoke it to me. And we saw, like, I'm not saying, I know prayer's not magic. Prayer's so entirely different from magic. I can't manipulate prayer, but I can go, like, when something's revealed, it doesn't mean that that's the final outcome. Like Abraham, or like we'll see Paul here, we can speak and say, God, how you're led in prayer. Anyway, I don't want to, prayer is not manipulative. We pray with God, but I think things can be revealed to us where God would have us pray and ask for a different outcome. That where we might have a perception like, wow, a tragedy, or where you're disturbed in your spirit. You're just disturbed for someone, right? And you can pray and ask God God, bring this forth differently. I'm asking for a different outcome than this situation seems to deserve, or a different outcome from how this, if you will, ship seems to be sailing. I'm asking God for an entirely different outcome from what I'm sensing, the denouement, right? The outworking of this situation, the situation itself. I'm asking God for something different. I'm not begging. I mean, sometimes we can feel desperate. I get that. There's situations worthy of our desperateness, by the way. But to know that there's a way that we can dislodge bad situations through Christ in us, that hope of glory. We can lift and change expectations about the outcome of a circumstance. Simply because Christ in us, as we move in prayer into it, we can kind of possess that land. We can speak a different story, a different outcome. We can say, God, your goodness is at work in this circumstance. The fierceness of your love is unfolding a different story. It's not fait accompli. Chapter 27, I'll start at verse 3. Luke here is speaking firsthand. He's with Paul in this moment. He knows the centurion. He calls him Julius. He knows him by first name. The next day we landed at Sidon, and Julius, the centurion who is watching Paul because Paul's arrested, in kindness to Paul, allowed him to go to his friends so they might provide for his needs. Okay, that makes me think Paul's probably sick. But maybe not. From there we put out to sea again and passed the lee of Cyprus because the winds were against us. When we had sailed across the open sea off the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we landed at Myra in Lycia. There the centurion Julius found an Alexandrian ship sailing for Italy and put us on board. Okay, so they're getting Paul to Rome. We made slow headway for many days and had difficulty arriving off, I don't know, I'm going to say Nidus. I have no idea. When the wind did not allow us to hold our course, we sailed to the lee of Crete, opposite Salmone. We moved along the coast with difficulty and came to a place called Fair Havens near the town of Lasea. So we're really feeling the trip. Thank you, Luke. We're really getting, he wants you to know, and we're seeing that the weather's working against them. We're already seeing, we sailed along the coast with difficulty. And I think this is it, and came to a place called Fair Havens. Okay, this has been a tricky boat ride thus far. Much time had been lost, and sailing had already become dangerous because by now it was after the Day of Atonement. He is telling us, we're being told where kind of chronologically in the year, right? Yom Kippur, but he's not giving us the dates, and this is NIV. But I don't know when Yom Kippur is, sorry. So that is telling us that it's late in the weather, that they should not be. This is when you don't sail. So Paul warned them, men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring great loss to ship and cargo and to our own lives also. That's what Paul sees. That's what he perceives in the Spirit. Since the harbor was unsuitable to winter in, the majority decided that we should sail on, hoping to reach Phoenix and winter there. This was a harbor in Crete, facing both southwest and northwest. When a gentle south wind began to blow, they saw their opportunity, so they weighed anchor and sailed along the shore of Crete. Before very long, a wind of hurricane force, called the northeaster, swept down from the island. The ship was caught by the storm and could not head into the wind. So we gave way to it and were driven along. That would be so scary. As we passed to the lee of a small island called Cauda, we were hardly able to make the lifeboat secure. So the men hoisted it aboard, and then they passed ropes under the ship itself to hold it together, because they were afraid they would run aground on the sandbars of Syrtis. A lot of detail here. This gives you a little insight to how Luke thinks and writes. They lowered the sea anchor and let the ship be driven along. We took such a violent battering from the storm that the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard. On the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. They're desperate. They're preparing. They're doing whatever they know how to do in a situation that there's no different outcome. Right? They're at the mercy. You know, the dread of the sea in the Old Testament is so apparent because it's so much bigger than they. They're in a situation now that has a singular outcome. And in desperation, they're just lightening the bolt. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days. No sun, no stars. They don't know if it's day or night. There's no hallmark of where they are in the midst of this situation and circumstance. And Paul had said to them that you will have loss of your ship, your cargo. They've lost their cargo. And human life. Mm-hmm. So on the third day when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. They saw no way forward. Mm-hmm. After they had gone a long time without food, and I just want to this verse 20, when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. This is Luke, and I believe this we is Paul and he and they in prayer. I'm sure they're in prayer. After they had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up before them and said, Men, you should have taken my advice not to sail from Crete. Then you would have spared yourselves this damage and loss. They've already had the loss. The loss has already been incurred. But now I urge you to keep up your courage. Why? Because God's met Paul. It goes from verse 20. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. Paul has gone and met, if you will, met the Father, has gone into that closet of prayer, wherever and however you pray. He's engaged with the Spirit. And here he is with a different word. He's encountered an experience and a reality of God that's spoken something different. And he can speak what he's met to these people. He can meet to these people that are there. They're at that point of death. They're at that point of loss. And he's got something different to speak in this moment. They should have listened to him, but it's not what he speaks. Now I urge you to keep up your courage. We finally gave up all hope of being saved. From all hope of being saved to now I urge you to keep up your courage. In between those 2 points is encounter of God and hearing a different word and meeting the Father and coming to a different expectation. It had been revealed to them that there would be great loss of life. Let me finish this so you'll know what I'm saying. Because not one of you will be lost. I urge you to keep up your courage because not one of you will be lost. Only the ship will be destroyed. Last night, an angel of the God to whom I belong. Okay, sorry. Last night, an angel of the God to whom I belong. He's speaking to people that don't know Yahweh. And whom I serve stood beside me and said, do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar, and God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. I want you to hear that God has graciously given to you the lives of all who sail with you. Why would God graciously give to Paul the lives of all who sailed with him? Because Paul asked for their lives. So keep up your courage. These are men that are holding him, under arrest. These are humble, the ship sailing to Italy that the centurion put him on. I don't know who these people are. But God graciously, the angel speaks these words, God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me. Nevertheless, we must run aground on some island. Nevertheless, the ship won't make it. So it's going to be very rough. He's encouraging them. Now be encouraged. Sometimes we can be in dramatic moments. We can sense the wrongness of the situation we're in. We can sense that this isn't going to go well. Paul's life is intimately tied into the lives of these sailors and the decisions they make. And Paul's asked for them. Last night, an angel of the God to whom I belong, with whom I serve, stand beside me. That the God is hard for me to read. Last night, an angel of the God to whom I belong, he's witnessing, and whom I serve, stood beside me and said, do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar. Okay, what's that? Paul, you're not going to lose your life. I'm guaranteeing, Paul, you're not going to lose your life. And God has graciously, I want just to feel Paul's heart in this situation, to feel Paul's prayers in this situation. And God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. And it gets very dramatic from here, okay? The undoing of this is very dramatic because the sailors try to save themselves, and Paul gets the soldiers to interface with the sailors so that they can't run off because they've got to be saved. There's 276 of them, and then the sailors want to kill the prisoners so they won't run off, and that doesn't happen. And the last line, let me just read the last line of this chapter. The rest were to get there on planks or on other pieces of the ship. It's blown asunder. In this way, everyone reached land safely. Paul's prayers stepped into the storyline and wrote a different outcome from what his spirit first perceived. His spirit first perceived that there would be great loss of life. And there's no loss of life. God's goodness and God's kindness. And Paul's not there like, oh, save me, and show these people that what idiots that they've put us in this situation, what idiots that they've created this circumstance. No, his heart is for the salvation of all. And he prays into that. And God graciously, it's personal here. God, the angel says, God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. There's a person, God's graciously. Why is it God's graciously? Because Paul's asked for this. He's prayed for this, that we go from verse 20, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. And then God meets Paul in prayer. The angel showed up to him in prayer. Last night, an angel of the God to whom, it's just hard for me to read the God. I'm sorry. An angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me and said, do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar. You're going somewhere. There's something about your standing trial before Caesar, and God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. We learned some things there. We learned that Paul stood trial before Caesar. And God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. So keep up courage, men. This is Paul's word. Keep up courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will happen as he told me. Nonetheless, we must run aground on some island, and it's dramatic, okay? The rest of this chapter is dramatic. But this is my be encouraged. That you and I can pray salvation for folk in the midst of, I want to say, diabolic moments of our life, of just where things are falling apart. We can ask God to move in that situation and bring salvation. Salvation to the very folk that are creating. Oh, we can ask God for mercy in the lives of people that are behaving badly, who've made great missteps. We can ask for salvation. We can ask God to work through, because our heart's asking for it, because our heart's wanting it. We can say, God, my heart's asking that the outcome of this situation and circumstance be very different than it is. Be blessed, be encouraged. No, God doesn't find fault. I just feel to say that. God doesn't find fault. God doesn't find fault. If you lack wisdom, God who graciously without finding fault. That we can sometimes see God as finding fault so much that the outcome is what it is because God's found so much fault. And I just feel to say that God's not running around finding fault, even when fault is there to be found. There's something, Paul's prayers here override the fault to be found. Be blessed, be encouraged.